Imagine this. My best friend Alex and I, at a university party, decided to pull a prank that seemed harmless. We called a cursed number, laughing and thinking it was just an urban legend. But from that moment, our lives changed forever. Alex, my best friend, is the kind of person you never forget. He's 22 years old, always has a smile on his face, and his brown eyes have a sparkle that makes you want to follow him into any crazy idea he has. I, on the other hand, am 21 and study psychology. I have blonde hair that falls in waves to my shoulders and green eyes that, they say, seem to read people's minds. It all started at a party at our university. It was one of those nights where you feel like anything can happen. The main hall was transformed, with colourful lights flashing to the rhythm of the electronic music that made the floor vibrate. Students were everywhere, some dancing, others laughing and chatting in small groups. Alex and I decided we needed a break from studying, so there we were, immersed in the atmosphere of pure fun. The hall was decorated with colourful ribbons hanging from the ceiling, tables full of drinks and snacks, and the smell of popcorn mixed with spilled beer lingered in the air. The party was in full swing when Alex had an idea that, at the time, seemed brilliant. He had read about cursed numbers on an internet forum while browsing randomly. According to him, there was a specific topic on the deep web where people shared scary stories about numbers that, when dialed, brought bad luck or even death to those who called them. With a few beers in his system, Alex thought it would be a fun prank and was also curious about what might happen. "Mia, have you heard about those cursed numbers on the internet? How about we try calling one of them?" he suggested, already visibly drunk. I laughed, shaking my head. "Alex, you always have the craziest ideas. But why not? It's just an urban legend." Alex had already visited the deep web forum before and saved some of those cursed numbers on his phone. He pulled out his phone and with a few taps selected one of the numbers. With just a few presses on the phone, we were ready for what we considered an innocent prank. Alex pressed to call. I watched curiously but skeptically, thinking it was all just a momentary silliness. He said the number rang about 7 times before going to voicemail. When the call ended, we looked at each other and burst into laughter. The mix of beer and the party atmosphere made everything funnier than it should have been, and we just continued our night filled with more alcohol and loud music. I woke up with a pounding headache, a hangover that made me swear never to drink again. The party the night before had been epic, but now I was paying the price. The sun had barely started to shine through the bedroom window, and I was still curled up under the covers when Alex's phone began to ring, and ring, and ring. "Alex, answer that phone," I mumbled, irritated, as I curled up further, trying to muffle the sound. He didn't move. He kept snoring loudly, completely oblivious to the world. The phone wouldn't stop ringing, and with the headache becoming unbearable, I finally got up to answer it. "Hello?" My voice was hoarse and full of irritation. On the other end of the line, a cold and sinister voice responded, "You will die in 6 days." "Maybe I'll die sooner from this hangover," I replied, laughing. The line went silent, and the call ended. I stood there holding the phone, trying to process what had just happened. Still somewhat drunk, I didn't take it very seriously, but I was a little worried. I shook Alex to wake him up. "Alex, wake up! Wake up now!" He moved slowly, opening his eyes with difficulty. "Mia, what is it? What time is it? Someone just called and said I'm going to die in 6 days." Alex rubbed his eyes and sat up in bed, still looking half asleep. Ah, Mia. It must be some kind of prank. People do that all the time, especially after a party. Don't worry about it. I laughed, trying to shake off the fear. Imagine if it's the curse of that cursed number. It would be funny if it were real. I made a few jokes, trying to ease the tension. I'll have to race against time to do everything I want in 6 days. Alex laughed too, shaking his head. Mia, cursed numbers aren't real. It's all urban legend. Maybe they have some kind of robot and call back to scare people. Alex grimaced and put his hand on his forehead. We might die together because this hangover is killing me, he said, laughing. That's the real curse from last night. Alex got up and started getting ready for the day, while I tried to shake off that uneasy feeling. Let's forget about it, I thought. It's just a silly prank. As the day went on, I tried to forget about the strange call from the morning. Alex and I went to our classes, trying to return to normalcy, but a sense of discomfort stayed with me. Everything seemed out of place. First, it was a shadow I saw out of the corner of my eye. When I turned, there was nothing. I thought it was just the hangover messing with my head. At lunchtime, we were in the cafeteria, and the tray of food in front of me slid off by itself, crashing to the floor with a loud bang. Everyone looked at me, and Alex laughed, saying I was clumsy. But I swear I didn't touch the tray. The feeling of something strange only grew. At night, I returned to the room exhausted. Alex was in the next room playing video games, so I decided to take a hot shower to relax. While the water was running, I heard a whisper, "Mia." It was so clear and close that it gave me goosebumps. I suddenly pulled back the shower curtain, but there was no one there. It must be my imagination, I thought, trying to calm down. After the shower, I lay down and tried to sleep. That's when the nightmares began. I was in a giant, dark, damp corridor with walls covered in mould. The floor was cold and rough stone, hurting my bare feet with every step. The smell of wet earth and decay was suffocating. The corridor seemed endless, and the dim light from sparse candles on the walls cast sinister shadows around me. I ran desperately, trying to escape from something I could hear but not see. Heavy footsteps echoed behind me, getting closer and closer. The feeling of being chased was so real that my heart was pounding frantically, and adrenaline rushed through my body, leaving my muscles tense and sore. The air was cold, and every breath felt like it was cutting my lungs. Suddenly, I felt a cold, slimy hand grab my ankle, pulling me back. I struggled to break free, kicking desperately, and then I woke up. I woke up drenched in sweat. My whole body was sore, as if I had really run for miles. The muscles in my legs were tense, my chest heaving as if I was still trying to catch my breath. The adrenaline was high, and my heart was racing. After a while, the exhaustion took over, and I fell back asleep. But the nightmares continued. In the second dream, I was in a dense, dark forest. The trees were tall, and their canopies formed an almost impenetrable roof that blocked the moonlight. There was a thick mist enveloping everything, making it hard to see ahead. Every step I took made the damp, leaf-covered ground crackle under my feet. The sound echoed eerily, as if the forest were alive. I began to hear whispers around me, indistinct voices repeating the phrase, 5 days, 5 days. The voices grew louder and more urgent, but when I turned to look, there was no one. The fear inside me grew, and my heart beat frantically. Suddenly, the sound of breaking branches approached rapidly. A dark figure emerged from the forest, moving toward me with terrifying speed. Before I could react, the figure struck me hard in the chest. The pain was intense and took my breath away. I woke up abruptly, gasping for air and feeling as if my chest was burning. When I looked, there was a red, painful mark exactly where the figure had hit me in the dream. I got out of bed, my heart racing. I went to Alex's room and knocked on the door. "Alex, I need to talk to you," I said, trying not to sound desperate. He opened the door, looking confused and worried. "Mia, what happened?" I showed him the mark on my chest. "This wasn't here before. I'm having horrible nightmares and feeling like something is very wrong." He frowned, clearly trying to understand. "Are you okay? Maybe it's just stress." "Alex, it's not just stress. Something is happening." "What if it's the curse of that number?" I hated to admit it, but the idea was starting to make sense. He frowned, clearly struggling to process what I was saying. "Mia, you know this all sounds like a big coincidence. Cursed numbers are just horror stories. Are you really believing this?" I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I know it sounds crazy, Alex, but look at this." I showed the mark on my chest again. This appeared out of nowhere. In my dreams, the voices were counting down the days. And I really felt the pain. "Something is very wrong." Alex looked at me for a long moment, worry evident in his eyes. "Okay, let's try to stay calm. Maybe we should investigate more about this number. See if we find anything concrete that explains all this." I nodded, feeling momentarily relieved that he was taking me seriously. "Yes, we need to find out more. But I'm afraid to sleep again. Every time I sleep, it seems like the situation only gets worse. Can I sleep here in your room?" "I don't know if I can stay alone," I asked, my voice trembling. He put a hand on my shoulder, trying to comfort me. "It's okay, Mia. I'll stay up and watch over you. If anything strange happens, I'll be here." "Of course, Mia. You can sleep here. We'll get through this together," he said, setting up the mattress on the floor for me. I lay down in Alex's room, trying to feel safe with him nearby. But sleep didn't come easily. Every sound, every shadow seemed like a threat. Alex's promise to watch over me helped a bit, but the fear was still there, relentless. The nightmares and the feeling of imminent danger didn't stop. I began to question if I could survive the next few days. After settling in Alex's room, I finally managed to calm down a bit. Exhaustion eventually took over, and I fell asleep. To my surprise, I had no new nightmares that night. The sleep was deep and uninterrupted, something I desperately needed. While I slept, Alex decided to investigate more about the number we had dialed. He returned to the deep web, browsing the same forum where it all started. As he delved deeper, he began to find disturbing accounts from others who had dialed the same number. The stories were eerily similar to what I was going through. People described intense nightmares, physical sensations of pain, and a malevolent presence that seemed to follow them wherever they went. There were also images, grainy photos of people with expressions of pure terror, some covered in unexplained marks, others found dead under mysterious circumstances. Each image and story made Alex's heart race faster. He discovered that the entity behind the curses was known as the Tormentor. It was an ancient spirit that fed on the fear and pain of its victims, torturing them psychologically and physically until they succumbed. The only way to escape the curse was to pass the number to someone else. But that meant condemning an innocent person to the same terrible fate. When I woke up the next morning, Alex was sitting at the table, his face pale and his eyes wide with worry. "Mia, we need to talk," he said, his voice grave. After settling in Alex's room, I finally managed to calm down a bit. Exhaustion eventually took over, and I fell asleep. To my surprise, I had no new nightmares that night. The sleep was deep and uninterrupted, something I desperately needed. While I slept, Alex decided to investigate more about the number we had dialed. He returned to the deep web, browsing the same forum where it all started. As he delved deeper, he began to find disturbing accounts from others who had dialed the same number. The stories were eerily similar to what I was going through. People described intense nightmares, physical sensations of pain, and a malevolent presence that seemed to follow them wherever they went. There were also images, grainy photos of people with expressions of pure terror. Some covered in unexplained marks, others found dead under mysterious circumstances. Each image and story made Alex's heart race faster. He discovered that the entity behind the curses was known as Pishacha, a Hindu demon. Pishachas are ancient spirits that feed on the fear and suffering of their victims, tormenting them psychologically and physically until they succumb. The only way to escape the curse was to pass the number to someone else, but that meant condemning an innocent person to the same terrible fate. The most terrifying detail was that the curse affected whoever answered the call, regardless of who made the call. When I woke up the next morning, Alex was sitting at the table, his face pale and his eyes wide with worry. "Mia, we need to talk," he said, his voice grave. I sat down next to him, noticing the pile of printed papers and the laptop open with several tabs full of horrifying texts and images. "What did you find?" I asked, feeling a knot form in my stomach. Alex began to show me the accounts he had found. I researched more about the number we dialed. "Mia, this is serious. There are people who went through the same things you are going through now. Nightmares, physical marks, and some of these people were found dead." As he spoke, my mind tried to process everything. The images of dead people and the accounts of pain and suffering were terrifying. "So it's real," I murmured, feeling a chill run down my spine. "Yes, it seems real. And the scariest thing is that the only way to escape the curse is by making someone else dial the number and someone answers," he said, looking into my eyes. "But that means condemning someone innocent, Mia." The feeling of frustration and anger began to boil inside me. "So, why the hell did you think it was a good idea to dial that number? It was your stupid idea, Alex, and now I'm cursed." My voice was full of fury, the words coming out much louder than I intended. Alex hung his head, clearly feeling guilty. "I know, Mia. It was a stupid joke. I didn't think something like this could happen. I just wanted some fun." "Fun!" I shouted, feeling the tears of anger welling up in my eyes. "Now I'm stuck with a demon's curse, and you think it was just for fun? This is not a game, Alex. I'm really scared." He approached and tried to put his hand on my shoulder, but I recoiled, crossing my arms defensively. "Mia, I'm sorry. I really am. We'll find a way out of this. I promise I'll do whatever it takes to help you." I felt a mix of anger and frustration. Part of me wanted to forgive him, but the other part was furious for putting me in this situation. "I hope you're right," I murmured, trying to hold back the tears, "because I don't know if I can handle this." Alex took a deep breath, running his hand through his disheveled hair. "I don't know, Mia, but we need a plan. Maybe there's another way to deal with this, some way to break the curse without hurting anyone." We spent the rest of the day discussing and researching, trying to find any information that could help us. The story of the Pishacha was ancient and disturbing, but there were no accounts of anyone who had escaped without passing the curse on. As I read the accounts and saw the photos of the victims, my anger only grew. The images of dead people and the accounts of pain and suffering were terrifying. And all this because of a stupid joke that Alex thought would be fun. After the intense day of research, Alex finally succumbed to exhaustion and fell asleep in the afternoon. He had spent the entire night looking for information about the Pishacha, and his body demanded rest. I, on the other hand, couldn't rest. The feeling of being pursued by the demon was constant, and the fear wouldn't leave me alone. When it was my turn to sleep, I once again asked to sleep in Alex's room. He didn't hesitate to welcome me again, setting up the mattress on the floor for me. "We'll get through this together," he said, trying to sound encouraging, but I could feel his worry. After a few hours of sleep, the nightmare returned, this time more sinister than ever. I was in a dark place, an abandoned house. The walls were peeling, with stains of moisture and mould. The air was dense and heavy, smelling of rot. Suddenly, I felt rough hands grabbing me. A man, whose face I couldn't see, grabbed me tightly. He dragged me through the house, his steps echoing on the creaky wooden floor. My heart was pounding frantically, and fear paralyzed me. He took me to a dark and dirty room, where he tied me to a chair and left, leaving only a crushing silence, broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. The man returned and began to torture me psychologically. He whispered cruel words, saying I would never escape, that my pain would be eternal. The strangest thing was that his face was an indescribable blur. 4 days! He repeated incessantly. 4 days is all you have left. Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my abdomen. I looked down and saw a knife gleaming in the dim light, stuck in my flesh. The pain was unbearable, and the blood began to flow. I started to scream, but the sound seemed not to leave my mouth, as if it were being sucked into a black hole. I woke up suddenly, sweating and clutching my abdomen. When I looked, there was a real cut, not deep, but enough to prove that something very wrong was happening. The blood stained my shirt, and the pain was real. "Alex! Alex! Wake up!" I shouted, desperate. He jumped out of bed, still groggy with sleep. "Mia, what happened?" "Look at this." I showed him the cut on my abdomen, my voice trembling. "It was in the nightmare, but it's real. Alex, the Pishacha is real." He turned pale, his eyes wide with fear and guilt. "Mia, I'm so sorry. This is my fault." "We don't have time for this now," I said, my anger momentarily replaced by panic. "We need to decide what we're going to do. I can't go on like this. We need to pass this curse on, but how are we going to choose someone?" We sat together, the moral dilemma weighing heavily on us. "Mia, I don't know if I can condemn someone to this, but I also can't lose you," Alex said, his voice choked with emotion. "What are we going to do?" I took a deep breath, trying to clear my thoughts. We need to think of someone we don't know, someone who might deserve it. But that doesn't make things any easier. Alex nodded slowly. But who? And how are we going to deal with the guilt? The moral dilemma was overwhelming. Condemning an innocent person to save my life seemed impossible to justify. But the alternative was to face torture, and eventually death by the pishacha. Maybe we need more time to think, I suggested. But time is running out. I don't know if I can handle more nights like this. Let's research more, Alex said, trying to sound decisive. Maybe we'll find another solution, something that doesn't involve hurting anyone. That night, we went back to researching frantically, looking for any clue on how to break the curse without passing the torture on. Each new discovery seemed darker than the last, but we couldn't give up. We were racing against the clock, trying to find a solution before it was too late. As I read the accounts and saw the photos of the victims, my anger only grew. The accounts were terrifying, and all of this because of a stupid joke Alex thought would be fun. Every shadow seemed to hide the pishacha. Every unexpected sound made my heart jump. We knew we didn't have much time, and the pressure was unbearable. After the horrible nightmare, I couldn't sleep anymore. The pain in my abdomen and the constant fear made it impossible to close my eyes without thinking about the pishacha. I decided I needed to stay awake at all costs. I went to the nearest pharmacy and bought caffeine pills and energy drinks, anything that would help me stay alert. While I was loading up on coffee and pills to stay awake, Alex was clearly in a moral dilemma. He knew he needed to find a quick solution, but the idea of condemning another person was eating him up inside. We spent hours discussing the possible consequences. The idea of passing the curse on was terrifying, but each minute that passed without a solution brought me closer to my end. Alex finally suggested Derek, a student he didn't like. Derek was known on campus for being arrogant and cruel. He had a history of bullying other students, especially those he considered weaker. He used his position as captain of the football team to intimidate and humiliate others. Once, he spread an embarrassing video of a classmate across the university, ruining the boy's reputation. Additionally, he frequently got into fights and used his influence to escape consequences. Derek has always been a jerk, Alex said, almost as if trying to convince himself. He humiliated and hurt so many people. Remember that video he spread about Jake? The guy almost had to leave the university because of it. For me, he deserves this. I took a deep breath. Honestly, Alex, I don't care much about Derek, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He's always been a huge jerk, and to be honest, I just want to get rid of this curse. The plan began to take shape. I would get close to Derek, gain his trust, and at an opportune moment, dial the cursed number on his phone. It was simple, but I needed to have his phone in my hands. Derek was always hitting on any girl, thinking they were all into him. His arrogance and overconfidence made him a perfect target. We knew he would be easy to manipulate. That night, I went to a party where I knew Derek would be. I wore a provocative outfit and made an extra effort to look confident and seductive. When I found him, I flashed him a charming smile. "Hi, Derek. What a coincidence to see you here." He smiled back, clearly pleased with the attention. "Mia, right? What is a pretty girl like you doing alone?" "Just having fun," I replied, pretending to be carefree. I spent the rest of the night talking and laughing with Derek, pretending to be interested in every word he said. He was so pleased with the attention that he didn't notice my true motives. At one point during the night, I asked for his phone to take some photos. Derek, always wanting to show off, handed me his phone without hesitation. "Here, take some pictures of us. Who knows, maybe later we can make some fun videos between four walls." He was literally a jerk. With the phone in hand, pretending to take pictures, I took advantage of a moment when Derek was distracted. Quickly, I opened the dialer and typed the cursed number. Seconds later, the phone began to ring. My heart was racing. The phone rang 6 times. Each ring felt like an eternity. Finally, the call went to voicemail. Done. Now it was just a matter of waiting for the callback and hoping someone would answer. He, unaware of anything, continued laughing and talking with other friends at the party. I took the moment to return the phone to Derek. "I'm going to the bathroom," I said, giving him one last smile before quickly walking away. I left the party and called a taxi, barely able to hide the tremor in my hands. During the ride home, my mind was in turmoil. Had we really succeeded? What if something went wrong? But the exhaustion and the momentary relief began to take over. When I got home, I quickly entered and locked the door behind me. Despite the fear, exhaustion took over me. I lay down on the bed, feeling my body finally relax. I fell asleep, and to my surprise, had no nightmares. It already seemed like a sign that I had gotten rid of the curse. The next morning, I went back to Alex's room, exhausted but with a feeling of relief mixed with guilt. I did it. I made the call on Derek's phone. We spent the rest of the day on high alert, waiting for any sign that the plan had worked. I felt torn between the relief of potentially being free from the pishacha and the guilt of condemning someone else. The following days were a torment of waiting and anxiety. We knew Derek should already be suffering the same horrors I had, but we tried to stay away from him to avoid suspicion. The guilt and fear mixed, creating a tense environment. A few days had passed since I dialed the cursed number on Derek's phone. Each day was a mix of relief and tension. Alex and I tried to go on with our lives, convincing ourselves that Derek deserved what was coming. On the morning of the 6th day, the campus was shaken by shocking news. Derek had been found dead in his room, brutally. Speculations began immediately. The news spread like wildfire, and soon an investigation was initiated. When the police arrived at the scene, it was horrifying. Derek was covered in inexplicable wounds, as if he had been attacked by an invisible and relentless force. His eyes were wide with terror, frozen in his final expression of agony. The walls of his room were stained with blood, and the overturned furniture indicated a desperate struggle. The investigators were perplexed. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of intrusion, no strange DNA, no murder weapon, nothing that could point to a culprit. Alex and I watched everything from a distance, with a huge weight on our conscience. We knew we were responsible for Derek's death, even if we hadn't wielded the weapon. The pishacha had completed its task, and Derek had paid the price for our survival. "He deserved it," Alex whispered, more to himself than to me. "He was a horrible person. This was a consequence of his actions." I nodded, trying to believe that. "Yes, Alex, he did terrible things. If anyone deserved this, it was him." But the guilt was a constant companion. We tried to convince ourselves that we had done the right thing, that we had no other choice. The truth, however, was that we had condemned someone to death to save my life. That reality was hard to ignore. Life on campus began to slowly return to normal. But for us, nothing would be the same. Derek had become a ghost that haunted us, even in his absence. We avoided talking about him, but the thought of his brutal death was never far from our minds. In whispered conversations, students speculated about what could have happened. Theories ranged from a failed break-in to a fight that had gotten out of hand. No one imagined that the real cause of his death was linked to a cursed number and an ancient demon. Days turned into weeks. The investigation into Derek's death went cold, with no concrete leads to follow. Eventually, the case was filed as an unsolved mystery. To the police, it was one of those cases that remain unanswered. But to us, the answer was clear and terrifying.